All right, let's jump right in. Today we're tackling something that's been stirring up a lot of talk lately. It's all about those CSCS cards.
Yeah.
The ones meant to show construction workers got the right skills.
But it's more than just a card, right? It's about safety, making sure things are done right, and really whether this whole system does what it's supposed to.
Exactly. And it seems like everybody's got an opinion on it these days, so this deep dive is perfectly timed. We've got stories of experienced workers getting pushed out, people saying it's just a money grab, and just a whole lot of back and forth about if these cards are actually worth it. So to get to the bottom of this, we've got two main sources for you today. One article really breaks down the good and bad of enforcing those CSCS cards. And then we've got another one that's, well, let's just say it brings a bit more of a personal kind of fiery take on things.
Yeah.
Our goal is to look at both sides, all the arguments, so you can walk away and decide for yourself if this whole CSCS scheme is something you buy into.
It's all about really understanding what people are saying, weighing the good against the bad, and then, yeah, forming your own informed opinion based on the facts.
So let's kick things off by looking at the arguments for these cards, the pro side, as some might call it. One of the big ones we see is that these cards make things easier for the main contractors out there. Think about it. Instead of having to check every single worker's qualifications one by one, they can just take a quick look at a card. At least in theory, it tells them that workers met some kind of standard.
And you got to see it from their side, especially on those huge projects with hundreds of workers running around. Having a simple way to check to verify things, it can save a ton of time and hassle.
Yeah, in construction, time is money, right? Efficiency is key. But of course, the biggest selling point they push is safety. The idea is that if everyone on site has been properly trained, have the right qualifications, we should see fewer accidents. Overall, it should be a safer place to work.
Right. The logic makes sense. More skilled workers, they should be working better, making fewer mistakes. And in the end, that means fewer accidents on the job.
So, in theory, it all sounds pretty good, right?
Right.
But here's where things get interesting. Our second source, it points out that while everyone knows about these CSCS cards, they're not actually required by law to work on a construction site in the UK.
That's true, but we got to understand the legal side of things here. The UK's got these construction design and management regulations that came out in 2015, and there's a specific part, Regulation 7, that says contractors got to make sure their workers are competent.
Okay, so there's like a subtle difference there, right? Because just having a CSCS card doesn't automatically mean someone's competent, does it? It really just shows they did some training.
Exactly. That's a really important point. Someone could pass a written test, get their card, but still not have the actual experience or the judgment to handle those unexpected situations you always get on a busy construction site.
So the law says you got to be competent, but these cards are mostly about training. Does that mean there's kind of a gap there? Makes you wonder if this system is really doing what it's set out to do.
That's a valid question, and it's something a lot of people in the industry are trying to figure out right now.
Okay, so we've got this potential gap between training and actual competence. But there's more to it than that, right? What are some of the other criticisms people are throwing at this CSCS card scheme?
Well, one of the big ones is that they're putting more and more emphasis on academic qualifications, especially NVQs, those vocational degrees.
And our source, they really go after this, saying that this whole shift towards needing NVQs is pushing aside experienced workers. You know, the ones who might not have those fancy qualifications but have been doing the job safely and well for years. Think about it. You're a bricklayer. You've got 30 years under your belt, but you never got around to getting a formal qualification. Now, all of a sudden, you're being told you need this extra piece of paper just to keep doing what you've always done.
It does raise a good point, doesn't it? Are we putting too much weight on paperwork and not enough on actual experience? Is a formal qualification always a better way to tell if someone's competent than years of doing the job?
It's interesting, and it kind of leads into another big criticism, that this whole CSCS scheme is more about making money than actually improving safety.
Yeah, you hear that a lot, especially when you think about how much these cards cost. It can be a real burden for individual workers, for smaller businesses too.
And then you've got the issue of fake cards. If there are fake cards out there, it weakens the whole system, doesn't it? How can anyone be sure that the qualifications are actually real?
No doubt about it. Counterfeit cards, they're a serious risk, both for safety and for whether people trust this scheme at all.
And we can't forget about the impact on those smaller contractors, the subcontractors. They often rely on those long-standing relationships they have with skilled workers, people who might not have these CSCS cards. In a tight labor market, demanding these cards could create a real headache for those smaller businesses, make it hard to find the people they need.
It's a tough spot to be in. On one side, you've got this push for standardization, for more safety measures, and on the other side, you've got the real-world problems faced by smaller businesses, especially in an industry where knowing people, trusting people has always been such a big part of how things work.
It is also interesting that the first advantage of the CSCS card scheme identified in the article is easing the responsibility of main contractors. In other words, working men and women are being penalized financially and in lost time merely to satisfy the needs of multi-billion-pound organizations.
Wow, that quote really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It makes you stop and think about who's really benefiting from this whole system. Sounds like we stumbled onto a real problem here. There are some good points on both sides of this whole CSCS card debate. It's not an easy thing to figure out.
So where do we go from here? How do we balance the need for safety and standards, but also take into account those concerns about cost, accessibility, and maybe even pushing out those experienced workers who don't have the paperwork?
Well, that article we've been talking about, should you bother enforcing CSCS cards? They actually suggest taking a different kind of approach. Instead of saying every single worker on every site needs a card, they say maybe we need to look at things a little more closely, take into account things like how big is the company, what kind of project is it, and what skills and experience do the workers actually have.
So more of a flexible system, one that understands that the construction industry is complicated instead of a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance, keeping those safety standards high, but also being realistic about the challenges different parts of the industry are facing.
Instead of just making sure everyone's got a card, checking off boxes, maybe we need to focus on building a system that really cares about competence, about safety, and one that's fair, one that any worker can access.
I think that's the big takeaway here. It's not about the card itself, it's about making sure those workers have what they need to do the job safely, effectively. That means the knowledge, the skills, the experience.
And maybe that means we need to look at different ways to assess those skills, to verify them, beyond just relying on those formal qualifications, those pieces of paper.
Absolutely. Got to think outside the box a little here.
Yeah.
What if, besides the formal training, we also looked more at practical assessments, peer reviews, maybe even mentorship programs where those seasoned pros can guide and evaluate the newer workers?
I like that. It's kind of like how doctors learn. They spend years in residency working alongside those experienced physicians and slowly take on more responsibility as they get better. Maybe construction could learn something from that.
Exactly. It's about building that culture of continuous learning, of mentorship, where those experienced workers are valued for what they know. And they play a big part in training that next generation of skilled tradespeople.
But even with a better apprenticeship system, we're probably still going to need better ways to figure out who's competent beyond just those written exams.
I agree. Maybe we need to start using more practical, hands-on assessments, things that actually simulate real-world stuff you'd see on a construction site. Imagine a test where you gotta build a wall or install some tricky wiring, and those experienced professionals are watching, evaluating your technique, how you solve problems, whether you're following those safety rules.
Now that's a test I'd like to see. It's about showing you can actually use those skills safely and effectively, not just knowing the theory.
And let's not forget about making sure whatever system we come up with is something everyone can afford, everyone can access. We don't want the cost to keep people out of the trades or stop those who need to update their skills.
Right. It's got to be fair. Leveling the playing field and creating opportunities for everyone who's willing to put in the time, learn the craft.
At the end of the day, we want a construction industry where safety and quality are the most important things. A system that works for everyone, the workers, the contractors, and the people who live and work in the buildings we create.
I'm going to put it better myself. So we've dug into the details of CSCS cards, looked at what's good, what's not so good, and even tossed around some ideas for a better way forward. But now, we want to hear from you. What do you think is the best way to make sure we've got a competent, skilled workforce in construction? If those CSCS cards aren't really the be-all, end-all proof that someone's confident, what would be a better way? To make sure we've got safety and quality on those construction sites. What would a system look like that's truly fair, effective for both the workers and the industry as a whole?
That's the big question, isn't it? And honestly, there's no simple answer. It's going to take a lot of people working together, coming up with some creative solutions. Contractors, workers, unions, the folks who do the training, even the government. Everyone's got to be involved.
Yeah, it feels like we need to move past just checking off boxes, showing up for a training course, and really dig into what it means to be competent in construction and how to build that competence in a way that's tough, but also something everyone can reach.
I think so. What if we looked at how other skilled trades do it, like revamped the whole apprenticeship system?
Okay, tell me more.
Instead of just these short courses, imagine something more, well, comprehensive. A program that combines on-the-job learning with real in-depth knowledge, the theory behind it all. And what's really important, those seasoned professionals, they're actively involved mentoring and evaluating the apprentices throughout the whole thing. It's all about creating this culture of constantly learning, of mentorship, where those veterans, they're valued for all that knowledge they have. They're actually shaping the next generation of skilled tradespeople, passing the torch.
But even with a stronger apprenticeship system, we probably still need more than just written tests to figure out who's truly competent.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe we need to incorporate more practical stuff, hands-on assessments that actually put you in those real-world situations you'd face on a construction site. Whatever system we come up with, it's got to be something everyone can afford, everyone can access. We don't want money to be the reason someone can't get into the trades or update their skills.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So we've really dug into those CSCS cards, looked at the good and the bad, and even brainstormed some ideas for how to do things better. But now we want to hear from you, the listeners. What do you think is the best way to make sure we've got a competent, skilled workforce in the construction industry?
We've just scratched the surface here. There's a ton of information out there, so keep digging, keep asking those questions, and come to your own conclusions.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of CSCS cards and the whole issue of competence in construction. Until next time, keep learning, keep building, and stay safe.